This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today I'm going to share a passage that I wrote in my book that's coming up later this year called Minding Yourself. It's changed from the Human Movement to Minding Yourself. At the moment I was writing about goals, and I just used an example, and something came to me that I remember reading at some point or hearing at some point, and it's situated within this couple of paragraphs, so towards the end, but I'm going to pull that apart after I read it anyway. But I go on to say, after explaining the importance of depth behind our goals and how often some of us may just not realize be sort of setting objective superficial goals with no depth or meaning to it. And I go, if someone was to just lose weight yet wasn't able to connect to the deeper reason, then they may find that the result will only be fleeting. They may get a result, but it'll only be fleeting. In the long term, nothing has changed. Nothing has actually been achieved. The person is still in the same place as they were before, just with a new wardrobe. One that they will have to sell or throw out if the results go back to where they were before they started the fitness journey, which is so often the case. As you can see in the above example, if the person doesn't have a worthy pursuit and continually develops their health IQ through education or love, then they end up yo-yoing. They look for superficial goals and are provided with superficial solutions. So many people are afraid to go deep. That is where you experience life. It is also where you can complicate life. But at its core, it is where we can truly understand ourselves and experience the richness that life has to offer. If we live superficially, then our experience is also superficial. People aren't afraid of love. They're afraid of not being loved in return. They're afraid of being rejected because they have rejected themselves. So they live superficially and keep people at arm's length in order to protect themselves from pain, not realizing that they are constantly in it. Pain, that is. And so one of the key things that I wanted to share with you within that is this idea of how we're often so afraid to go deep. Whatever that may mean for the individual. It might mean that we're afraid to go deep from a personal perspective. We're afraid to go deep with other people. It could mean a whole range of things. But the key thing is that we may be shielding ourselves from this fear of being rejected, not realizing that by doing that, we're actually rejecting ourselves. It's not that we're afraid of love or that we think love is stupid. We're afraid of not being loved in return. We're afraid that if we open ourselves up and be vulnerable, that they won't be returned, and then we'll be left there empty and unprotected and unsafe. And unfortunately, that's a lie, because if we protect ourselves and constantly live in this space of protection where we're defending ourselves away from not being loved by somebody, which, by the way, and I'll go on to explain that there's so many factors within that. It's so often that we just haven't accepted ourselves. We've rejected ourselves. That's why we fear it. Because we push it away, and we have already done it within, that we don't want to see it without. Maybe we saw it with our parents, maybe we saw it with themselves, maybe our caretakers rejected themselves and passed that on to us, but unconsciously we don't know that we're doing it. And this is a really tough subject. It's a really touchy subject for a lot of people, especially those of us that are trying to uphold some sort of strong image, some stoic image or something along those lines, like we don't care. Too often we might say we don't care, but it's like, if you're telling me you don't care, why are you telling me you don't care? It usually means that there is some sort of care there. What's going on? Like, we're all worthy of love, and it's all something that we need. The problem is that by fearing rejection and by putting that power onto someone else, we're handing over the conditions of our worth. And so what happens is that if we're either trying to get love externally or we're avoiding rejection externally, it's actually driven from the same place. It's driven from this conditional worth that we have actually taught ourselves is based upon other people's opinion. And so when we just completely protect ourselves from rejection, all we're doing is protecting ourselves from not knowing how to deal with the conditions that we've put on our self-worth. And so rather than learning how to actually own our self-worth and understand our self-worth, we simply just shut off. And this is one of the issues that we see when people go, I don't like emotional people. It's like, you don't like people being happy? It's like, what the fuck's going on for you if you don't like... They're like, no, that's not what I mean by emotional. It's like, that's an emotion. It's like, we can't just shut off one emotion, but have emotion access to all the others with a rich, healthy relationship. You either have access to your emotions and are emotionally intelligent, or you have shut off your emotions. It's something that and maybe this is conditional. It can be. It was for me. I shut off somebody in my life emotionally, and it impacted so many of my relationships. I didn't even know I did it. I was a teenager. It was a way that I did to protect myself. But it caused issues for over a decade in relationships that I wanted to care about. But when it came down to it, I just didn't have access and maturity to those emotions. And it really made a big impact in a negative way. But then, say in a negative way, it's like, what's negative and positive? Because it allowed me to learn how to grow to be the person I am today and love the people in my life that I have in my life today. So there's no real, in looking at a process breakdown, there's no real negative or positive, because we know this. We know that so many things that we once deemed were negative allowed us to move into a space of positive. It's like we go to the fucking movies to watch a story about the negative thing that happened that turned into a positive, because it was never negative and it was never positive. It just was a situation. It's really quite fascinating. But one of the key messages from this podcast is looking at ourselves and being able to go, am I rejecting something within me because I'm so scared to be rejected externally that I'm protecting myself? Because if we're protecting ourselves, it presupposes that we need protection. Whereas when we move into vulnerability, that actually is strength. Protecting ourselves is not strength. Vulnerability is strength because it means that we don't need to be protected. We're okay as we are. We don't identify as a body or as our thoughts or as our behaviors. We understand it goes deeper than that, and that people are going to judge. And so if somebody's not ready to love me, right, and this is so important, if somebody's not ready to love me, that often has nothing to do with me, right? It often has so much to do with where they're at. It doesn't mean I'm not worthy of love. It means they're not in a position where they love themselves enough to give it. And it's a really big fucking difference. Because when somebody's in a place where they love themselves, which means self-acceptance, it's not about this, fucking masturbation or something along those lines. It means self-acceptance, and I am who I am, and I'm completely okay with all of the good and the evil and everything in between, and I'm unraveling as I go, and I accept that. And then that person is going to be in a space where they're going to be able to accept somebody else at the same level, you see. Too often we may make the mistake to realize that when somebody's not in a position to love themselves, it means we're not worthy of love, and it's a lie. It's a lie. It's the same thing as when we want to be liked by somebody. It's like when we realize that most people don't even like themselves, maybe not most people, but when we realize the people that we're trying to get liked by may not like themselves, then what's their judgment of us? How much value and weight do we put on it then? This stuff is complex, but it can also be broken down to be really simple. Is that the most courageous thing we can ever do is move into vulnerability and unravel who we are and get rid of who we're not. And by doing that, we stop giving power to people of our self-worth. And then that's the key thing, because everything from there is simply just a byproduct and becomes downstream from that situation. This is what it means to develop. It means to get rid of the bullshit. And this is what my argument comes from so often about not always becoming more. I know that's a current theme for a lot of people, but it's actually sometimes it's becoming less. And I'm not trying to get people to play a smaller game. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to do. But playing a big game for the sake of someone else is not a big game. That's a small game. And on that note, I'm done. If you found this podcast beneficial, it would mean the world to me if you'd pass it on to someone else that you think would also find it beneficial. If you haven't already, then jump on Facebook, search Mood Prep Online, and join the conversation. I'd love to see you there. And of course, check out the rest of my services on davenixon.com.au. And look, that's kind of it. That's me done. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But until then, peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick and slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.